Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Hump with Katie. I'm your host, Katie Thiroux, and I have another incredible episode for you today with the bassist Alexander Claffy. If you're new to The Hump, this is a series where I interview some of the world's most fantastic artists and musicians and find out why are they so amazing, how did it all happen, and ultimately, what can we learn from their journey? We've already had some fantastic guests like Larry Grenadier, Derek Hodge, Christian McBride, Rufus Reed, Justin Coughlin, and so many others. You can listen to all these episodes and more on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and you can go watch them on YouTube. So go subscribe, download, leave a comment, and let me know who you want to hear from next. Before I bring you today's amazing episode, I'd love to thank our sponsors. And first up, we have the clothing company, Jams World. You guys, I absolutely love Jams World. I'm wearing a Jams World right now, of course. And the reason why I love it is because the fabric is made from 100% spun crushed rayon, and it keeps me cool and comfortable. They've been making clothing in Honolulu, Hawaii since 1964. And the artwork is so unique. It's screen printed right onto the fabric, and it looks like a piece of art. Go to jamsworld.com and use the promo code Jazz15, and you'll get 15% off your entire online purchase. Next up, I'd like to thank Kolstein's String Shop. I absolutely love Kolstein's. They are doing amazing things for the bass community. They have 2 amazing locations in Long Island, New York, and a killer online store. Go to kolstein.com and use the promo code KD10, and you'll get 10% off your entire purchase. All right, the time has come to bring you our episode today, and we have the bassist Alexander Claffy. Well, he's much more than a bassist. He's kind of a renaissance man. I didn't know him at all. I know who he was, but it was really fun to get to meet him and chat with him and talk about his upbringing in Philadelphia. As we know, if you've been listening to the show and if you know about the bass, Philadelphia has a huge, rich, deep history with the bass and jazz music in general. So we talked about his upbringing there, and then when he moved to New York and up until what he's doing now. It was a really fun conversation, and I know you'll enjoy it. So without further ado, here is Alexander Claffy. Well, cool. Thanks, Alex. I'm going to call you Alex. I won't take up too much of your time. I know you're a really busy person, so I definitely want to talk about that.
Oh, that's nice of you to say.
And I want to start, like most things, kind of like at the beginning, because it was, I did some research through people I know about you and then also looking some stuff up. But so did you grow up in Philadelphia or around Philadelphia?
Yeah, I grew up in a small town outside of Philadelphia called Westchester, Pennsylvania. But for all intent and purposes, my musical experience was very much in Philadelphia, and the surrounding area, but really downtown Philadelphia. Oh, okay. Sorry, we're in a hotel. On the, I'm gonna go lock that door. You can edit this part out.
Oh.
Cool. All right, there we go. Or you can leave it in. I don't really care.
I'll probably leave it in.
Yeah, who cares? It's real jazz stuff right here.
Yeah. So you grew up in Philadelphia, and that's has a long history of being a town of not just music and jazz, but bass players.
Yeah. It's an incredibly deep lineage. First of all, if you're talking about Black American music, jazz, Reggie Workman, Jimmy Merritt, Jimmy Garrison, Arthur Harper lived there for a long time. I can't remember if he was from there or not. Just so many great bass players that, obviously Christian McBride and Derek Hodge is from Camden, right over the water. So yeah. A lot of his musical experiences were in Philly. It's a whole bunch of guys, Mike Boone, Anthony Tidd, Lee Smith, Christian McBride's father, who's incredible. Just like a whole bunch of great, serious musicians. And my father is an amazing musician. He was kind of what they call like a society musician or a club date musician, and worked a lot around New York in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and still plays a lot of events. And my mother was a singer in like some event bands, met my father, and then she became a talent agent in New York City. So we were in this small town of Westchester, but I was also, all of our families in Philly. So I was always downtown, and my dad super deep into Cole Porter and Gershwin and that kind of stuff, and Broadway. It was really, but also Motown and like Chuck Brown and Curtis Blow, and then a little bit of he would like one Joe Cocker song or whatever. So because he was, you know, working a lot of private events, and his specialty was like the American Songbook, especially a lot of the stuff and, you know, off of the movies like High Society and all that stuff. He loved that stuff. But then through playing events, he had to know all this other kind of music. He'd have the Supremes on or the Temptations. So it was just this big mess of stuff, and in the best way possible. And I got exposed to all of it. And then Philly's the same way. You know, on one block, Sansom Street, where Chris's Jazz Cafe is, you have to be able to, I always say you have to be able to play like Crescent and, you know, Love Supreme on one end of the block, and then the other end is like, you know, Jill Scott and the Roots Crew. And so it's amazing. So yeah, Philly's super heavy. And I think about that every time I pick up the bass, that I have a little bit of a duty, you know, to continue pretty heavy bass lineage, you know?
Yeah. That's very, very cool. So how did the bass start for you? I know you come from a musical family, but what was your first bass experience?
It's funny. Right now I'm in Miami and I'm playing a couple gigs with a childhood friend of mine, Jason Matthews. He's in a couple great bands, Twin and Electric Kiff, and they're more on the fringes of what you would call jazz, and, you know, I would say jam band in the best possible way.
Yeah.
Because they're all really brilliant musicians and they make some really special moments happen. I played keyboards. I met Jason and Matt Block, who's now CEO of La Reserve Records, who I'm still associated with them. It's a crew of us that are still really tight. And they wanted to have a band, but I was a keyboard player, so they said they needed a bass player. So I walked down the street to Westchester Music, which is in Westchester, Pennsylvania, and AC/DC, bam, da-da-da-da. It was on the, you know, and I picked up this old, actually it wasn't that old. It was a Mexican-made jazz bass from the early 2000s, and it was really messed up. It had a warped neck and just, you know, but it was cheap. And I picked it up, and my dad was like, all right, you're going to help me clean out my office for like a week.
Yeah.
And then your mom is going away with your sister, but you don't get to go. So she's going to give you a little present. And if you pull that together, maybe in 2 weeks, you can buy this bass, which was, you know, cheap.
Yeah. Well, and how old were you at this time?
13, but I had already been acting, singing, tap dancing because of my mom, and, you know, hearing all this Gershwin stuff and Cole Porter playing piano. I played trombone, I played guitar. There was drum sets around the house. I was always, so my father was kind of worried, you know, in a way, like, oh, he's goofing around on all these different instruments, you know.
Yeah, pick one.
Yeah,
pick one and get serious.
I wasn't exactly of the generation like the Jacob Collier, you know, Domine, J.D. Beck, where they're just like playing everything. And, you know, there wasn't YouTube or anything. So I would just hear a record and try and play whatever I liked, and then move to the next instrument and do that. And so my dad was kind of getting a little worried about that. And then bass grabbed me because of the social thing, because of the band. You know, and that's something I still find is really cool about bass players, is they always unite the band. They're always
I mean, you could find any random person on the street, and just if they have a bass, it's like, oh, we need, you know, come on, we need you. It's like we're such a needed people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, that, so Jason and I were playing together last night for the first time in a long time, and it was great because he's the person who got me to start playing bass, and still play some of the same stuff. We love to play some Herbie tunes and Chick stuff. You know, obviously we all know that Chick Corea just passed away, so that was heavy on everybody's mind. Kenny Garrett stuff, and it was great. And and that's how the bass found its way into my life. And then I started going downtown to Philly. And Justin Faulkner, Dahi Devine, Emmanuel Wilkins, James Santangelo, these guys were starting to do stuff, and they were at the Kimmel Center camp, and I was going with Jason to the University of the Arts summer camp. And so they were right down the street, so all the kids would hang, talk about what records you're listening to. Everybody's like 15, all, you know, sussing each other out. Really funny when you think about it in hindsight. So from there, I was in the UArts ensembles, and I was starting to get good with like keys, and I could have his transpose stuff. And I was like, a lot of the stuff, my dad is like a really heavy musician. Some of that stuff I had a really good ear. You know, I couldn't read it all, but
is this still electric bass?
still electric bass. And then they said, man, we want you to join this ensemble at Settlement Music School. We want you to go to the Clef Club, which is where everybody learned how to play, Jonathan Blake and Jaleel Shaw and Justin and Emmanuel and myself and a whole Michael Stephenson, who's a great singer in New York. I mean, there's just too many to name. Ari Honig, I think, and Kurt, I believe they spent time there. And Christian McBride, obviously. And so from there, I just started playing upright, but then I was getting into my high school's jazz band and they were trying to force me to play upright. So I was playing this Zeta bass, this Yamaha electric upright, whatever you want to call it. And that started because I was playing a J bass, and then that started to kind of interest me a little bit. And then eventually I met Dahi Devine, who's a great saxophone player from Philadelphia who went to New School with us, great composer, good friend, and Justin Faulkner and James Santangelo. And we played this first rehearsal. And they were like, you got to switch if you really want to do this. And then it was, of course, Love Supreme, Live the Half Note, all the Philly culture and stuff. I just got totally immersed in that. And that was it. And Jimmy Garrison was like my guy. I was like obsessed with that. And that was it, So 16, 17, like almost a year and a half before I left for New York, and Reggie Workman saw Michael Stephenson and myself at a event at the Clef Club opening up for him. It was him and Charles Tolliver and Rodney Green and George Cables, I think. It was a great band. And we got to play before them. And he remembered me at my audition 2 weeks later. So that was it. Then I got into New School. My family didn't have very much money, so the New School hooked it up through Mr. Workman. Thank God for him. So, and that was it. Off to New York, and then, talk about a steep learning curve.
Yeah, because before that, like when you're still in high school and like you're playing with all these, I love that you're like to have that experience of playing with people your same age you guys are all kicking each other's butts, right? You need to check this out, you need to learn this song. But did you have a teacher? Like, did you have those, classical chops? Like, were you an incessant practicer, or was it just more learning the music, like learning what it is?
Well, the issue I always have had is that, obviously there's different levels of this, especially once you get into, jazz, Black American music of any sort. There's so many great musicians in a condensed space that when you say something like, I have good ears, like you could also just point to 10 other people in the room that are like, Stacy Dillard, I go into the West 4th Street train station. He's like, oh, that's a C train. Yeah. Those kind of ears, right? I don't have that, but I had good ears. So for me, I could pick up progressions. Pretty much when I got the electric bass, my dad would sit me down on these society gigs, which is something that the older musicians will know what I'm talking about, but the younger, even guys my generation, they never really had to do it, which is like, you show up in a tux. Yeah. There's no breaks, it's not, you're not playing all cover band stuff. You're playing for older people. So it's a lot of jazz, but you don't take any solos. You play in 2 on electric bass the entire time. You play one chorus of a song, you play one chorus of Anything Goes and one chorus of To Lovely, and then one chorus of It's All Right With Me. And and these piano players are incredible. They know thousands of songs. Yeah. And my dad is one of these guys. So he would sit me next to him, and I would have to learn. Just
hear it right there.
Progressions, everything came naturally through that. So then later on, we'd be playing stuff, even with Johnny O'Neill or something, a decade later, and I couldn't name the song, but I knew where it was going. Like I knew where. So that was like a really, really cool thing for me. And that's the thing is like, my ears were always stronger. So I was always getting the other parts together. Classical technique, I studied with a guy at Westchester University, Peter Paulson, who was very good, but I didn't want to hear it. I just wanted to listen to Jimmy Garrison, and I wanted to, I thought I needed to play really hard and make my fingers bleed and be, but that's, as we know, that's the excitement of youth is wasted on the young, and you learn much differently.
Well, what a great experience though to just even play in 2, for hours.
Yeah, right? As a bass player. Exactly. And when I moved to New York, I had to really get serious about technique. With I studied with Orin O'Brien. She's fantastic.
Yes. I want to talk about that.
Mr. Carter, of course, very formative. I didn't take that many lessons. I'd say maybe about 10 to 15 lessons with Mr. Carter, but very formative.
Enough for a lifetime.
Yeah, one lesson with Mr.
Yeah.
Carter feels like a lifetime's worth of study, and I still think about that stuff every day. But yeah, then I got serious about technique, and I started practicing like crazy.
And then that's why I asked, because when I hear you and I see videos of you, I see and I hear it, you know, the technique is there. So that's why I was asking if that was something that came. So it came later.
Not naturally at all. Totally not naturally. Maybe something about the first instrument you pick up, you have an affinity with. Like electric wasn't the first instrument I picked up, but it was the first bass instrument. So when I pick it up, I have a certain, I played a whole, 3-set gig last night on electric after probably not doing a gig on electric in 6 months. And I felt way more comfortable than I would have on upright if I had taken that kind of time off. Obviously it's different muscles and stuff.
Yeah.
But just to say the affinity for upright classical technique didn't come to me naturally. And I had to really, really work hard at it. And I still do. I mean, lifting weights, doing a lot of push-ups, a lot of long tones, a lot of scales, a lot of shifting exercises, a lot of working with the metronome and the drone, all that stuff. That's the stuff that really, that's the stuff that really keeps me cool, generally.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because, I remember there's a quote, like someone was talking to Ray Brown and they said, oh, you're such a natural talent. And of course, Ray Brown like blew up at him and said, no, I mean, I had to practice to get to where I am today. I still practice. So, it's good for people to hear that. It just doesn't magically happen.
Yeah. Ray Brown practiced, man.
Yeah.
I'm sure Christian McBride practiced a ton.
Oh yeah, and some of those things, like exactly, and they stick with you, like you're saying with like the electric bass stuff.
I've heard that John Patitucci is an avid practicer. I've heard that from people, and you see it as soon as you see him play. It's incredible. Yeah, and all those Larry Grenadier and Joe Martin, everybody that I really Gerald Cannon, Peter Washington, and practicing doesn't necessarily just have to be in the way that you're, doing Stortrab or Smandl or working on triplets with the metronome, like that's like Orlando Le Fleming is really deep into that with Ari Koenig. And it can also be like just sitting in front of a pair of speakers, which is really what I find myself doing the most. Honestly. Yeah. Well,
on the subject of practicing and studying, would you mind talking a little bit about what it was like to study with Orin O'Brien, because she's just a legend.
Yeah, it was great. It was probably about 20 lessons over the course of a year. It was a tricky spot for me because I was in school and I was trying to forge my own path financially and working in the scene. So, wasn't living in dormings, doing the whole thing. Even though I was young in school, I really, my parents had a tough time at that time and I didn't want to put any stress on them. So when I left for New York, I said, you do your thing, I'll figure it out. Yeah. So, when you're working all the time, it's really, really hard to go to school. And then on top of that, to have like one of the best teachers in the world and never feel like you're letting them down. And I felt like I was never really getting to what she was presenting. She was an incredible educator and I was soaking it all in, but I felt bad because I couldn't in hindsight, they say hindsight's 20/20. I wish I could have reciprocated the practice time a little bit more. But I'd say in the first 6 months studying with her, I was really, really, really on top of it. And maybe even in the last 6 months, I did better than I thought, but it's these kind of people with infinite wisdom that always makes you feel like, oh man, like I wish I just had all day 24/7 to deal with what you're giving me, because it's gold. The double bass notebook is gold. I have to find my copy of it. I used to look at it all the time. Her book. She was so lovely and so kind, and I was so young and scared of New York and teachers and everything, and she was just perfect. And she was ultra patient with me, a jazz student who, you know, had studied some technique before with Greg August. When I moved to the new school, they placed me in proficiency with Andy McKee, who helped show me a lot of stuff because I was new to the instrument. And then after a year, I got out and I studied with Greg August and Dwayne Burno, which was great. And I love Burno. He's obviously not with us in body now, but I miss him all the time. But yeah, that's, you know, studying with her was just like, wow. Like just everything that would come out of her mouth be something about how to hold the bass or how to put your arm on the bass. It just be like, wow. And it was, she'd been, I guess, educating for so long at that point, she knew just how to deliver something and say something to where the student immediately understood it. And that's something as an educator that I'm striving for, is to just drop one sentence on somebody and then they're like, oh, they get it. And then they go and they teach themselves, you know? So it was incredible. I feel really lucky. I think we emailed about 2 years ago. I was like, can I come back and get some lessons? And I think she was like, oh, I'm too busy.
Yeah.
And I was like, I get it. You're one of the greatest. Or something, she was working with maybe it was COVID and she wasn't taking any students, but one of the true great bass teachers for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And those are great educators who really teach you how to teach yourself. And then if you absorb it, you know, in a right way, then like you're saying, you can then teach others how to teach themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how was your time at New School? Did you complete it there?
I did. I dropped out for a year because Bruce Harris called me to go to the Jazz at Lincoln Center Doha, and originally it was supposed to be 4 weeks. So the New School maximum allotted time for you to leave was 3 weeks. I thought about it, and I remember I was standing with Eric Rivas in the back of Dizzy's, and he's one of my mentors, early teachers too. When I was in Philly, he used to give me lessons. He used to, in Orin Evans' basement, you know, he was very patient with me too. And I was like, man, should I go on the road and drop out of school? And Jerry Weldon was up there playing, and I was like, it's with him.
Yeah.
And he was like, are you kidding me? Yeah. Like, don't, like, listen to that guy's sound. You're going to learn so much. And sure enough, he was right. So I dropped out, and that year wound up being a really busy year. I think I was with Geri Allen that year. I was touring with Emmett Cohen. We did some stuff in Scandinavia, and I did another Doha run, Jazz Link Center, with somebody else. I think I wound up going to China with Bruce. It was just a year of like, suddenly I was out there. I was on the road, and I recorded a record with JD that year, I think, and was working in Smalls all the time. I think Kyle and I had the late nights still. So, you know, I was just starting to get in the scene in a really more serious way. And it was great. And then when I went back to finish, it was awesome. I did one last semester. I think I dropped out before my last semester. And I went back and I just crammed in the last semester. And I had a big band for my senior recital, it was amazing. It was like Freddie Hendrix and Josh Evans and Hillel Salem and I can't remember who else. It was just a really amazing band. And it's a really, really good memory. So then when I finished, I missed graduation. I hit the road. I think I was out with Jazz Reach, Hans Schumann or something, and I just missed the graduation, and that was it. And then I was working all the time, which is, I feel very fortunate about, you know, to have work at any time, even now, you know.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about school, especially a place like New School, but you kind of make what you want out of it, right? It's not like they don't really tell you exactly what to do. So going out on the road, being away from New York, from home, you learned way more than you would have just staying there.
Yeah. I mean, I learned a lot at New School too. I got to study with so many different people, you know, like I said, Greg August, Dwayne Burno, let's see who else, Andy McKee, Jimmy Cobb, Mike LaDon, great teachers, Mr. Carter, of course. Carlos Enriquez, Ben Wolf, very formative teacher in the way of thinking about music and thinking about harmony and thinking, you know, a real thinker.
Yeah.
I guess is what I'm trying to say. I don't know if that's correct, but he's really like cognizant of everything. Even a few weeks ago, he texted me about something he saw a stream of mine and he asked me to think about something a little bit differently.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I mean, I study with John Clayton and he does the same. He'll do the same thing.
Oh, he's great. Yeah, he's great. I've only got to, I met him on the jazz cruise. I played with Gerald a little bit in New York. You know, we'd do a session here and there when he was in New York, but John, I just say, oh, Mr. Clayton, it's really nice to meet you. You know, he's just one of the bass gods, you know?
Yeah. But that's great. You have like these allies, these bass allies, because sometimes like it could feel, you know, like people, even though they don't say it, they don't want you to do well. You know, that can be their intention, or that's how you feel it. So it's nice when you feel like someone like Ben Wolf's like checking you out and wants to help you.
Well, I have to say, my greatest and closest bass ally all the way, you know, bad to the bone is Gerald Cannon. We're very, very close. And Mike Boone too, still, you know, from Philadelphia, but, you know, recently over the past 5 or 6 years, the relationship that I've cultivated with Gerald as somebody who's really, you know, really been there, really done a lot of things, really still doing the things he wants to do. And also creating an army of bass players at Juilliard and Oberlin that are sounding incredible and teaching them, you know, in such an amazing way, and also recommending his students for things, not, you know, never like, and what you're talking about, you know, I see that more from my peers. I see a lot of posturing going on from my peers. Benny Green kind of made a post about this on Facebook the other day, and I really agreed with it. And you know, it's just, it mainly comes from the peers, and I think it comes from youth and insecurity. And I've been guilty of it too. We've all been guilty of it because it's a very sensitive profession. And it's also been a situation where there's not really enough work in the festivals or the clubs. Yeah. So the clubs and the festival slots are backed up with older guys. And there's not as much room for people of my generation, which is not necessarily how it was in the 90s. There was a lot more stuff. So there was a lot more room. And, you know, that's not really the way it works in New York. So there's a lot of discontent among the younger musicians and probably the older musicians for one reason or another. But all that being said, Gerald Cannon never did that with me or any of his students. And I haven't really seen any of the older bass players ever do that. You know, I think
bass players, we don't.
Yeah, bass players we're working no matter what.
Yeah.
So we're cool. But I see it in the other instruments, and I see the frustrations, and the frustrations also aren't unfounded. I understand them because it's a tough racket, man. Being a musician is a tough racket. I kind of already knew what it was going to be all about because of my parents. You know, playing gigs when I was a kid, I knew that it was going to be tough. And some people want to see you do well and some people do not. And you got to be realistic about that. And that's cool. You just do well because you want to do well.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at. I'm trying to play great bass lines because I want to fall. I'm trying to play great bass lines because I want to fall asleep at night and be like, okay, I gave 100%. You know,
yeah.
I tried to make this ensemble sound the best I could because I care, you know. And that's really what it's about. If you're doing it for any other reason, then I feel like, you know, you're just
do something else.
Posturing.
Yeah.
You know? And it happens.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk about that, like, because your drive as a musician, as someone on the scene, as you're like a collaborator, you're a producer, you're a very like community oriented person. At least, you know, that's my perspective from when I see it. But it's cool because, well, like you're saying, your generation or a little bit younger, but I see like people like you or Stephen Feifke or Benny Benack, like making your own, like you said, it is kind of true. Like there's more musicians than there are gigs or festivals and things like that. But you made something new. I feel like you've made a whole new thing for yourself, and other people like-minded like you are doing the same thing. Do you feel that way?
Oh, that's nice of you that's very nice of you to say that. I appreciate that. I realize that the musicians that I idolize the most wear a bunch of hats, and they're not just playing, you know, Red Garland Trio 1957. They do play that, but they do a bunch of other things in their life, you know, and that's, of course, that's what I'm working on most days, is listening to Paul Chambers with Red Garland Trio. I'm using that as an example, but I'm saying being a producer is great. Being a producer is only going to help you with your ears. I've been, not even moonlighting, just being fascinated with audio engineering has helped my bass sound tremendously. Has helped my playing an insane amount. It helps to focus your ears. I've tried to create a lane where if somebody calls me to produce a record, I'm there with bells on and I do my best job and try and bring whatever is at the table there that day, to a higher level or to the highest level that I have the ability. That being said, playing electric bass and composing and now starting to sing more, which I know that you sing and play bass, and it's always been something that's fascinating to me. There shouldn't really be any rules about what you want to do. For me, it's all music. And that's the way that I grew up, and I came back to that. And I think I went through periods of my youth of being like, is this right? Am I a jazz bass player? Wait, do I need to wear a suit and tie every night and have a watch on and be very quiet? And there's a lot of stereotypes and archetypes to how a working bass player should be. And they make sense, some of them, because you want somebody who's reliable and, calm and the big papa or mama of the band, everybody wants that. But there's also other things, like I really loved rock music growing up, big time, So when I have my band, I can play a ballad right next to something that gets intense, the way I used to have Ben Yinsen in the band and that style of like what we were going for. All of our heroes very much, and who comes to mind big time is Chick Corea, obviously since we just lost him, but on a Blue Mitchell record, it's incredible. It's mind-blowing. And then also Return to Forever and also the acoustic band. There shouldn't be these limits that are in place. That being said, we need to give as much respect as we can to the history of the music and who's come before us and do our due diligence of, being a monk in the temple of music, as Spike Wilner once said to me. I like that.
But also being okay with evolving yourself.
Yeah, so that relating to social media is tough because social media is 1 minute or look what I can do, blah, 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 you know what I mean? Which is like, and then every one of us goes, oh shit, like, should I be doing that? Should I be playing faster? No, social media is the antithesis of jazz music and the subtlety in music and all that stuff. It's, but it's a necessary evil. If you want to drum up work, if you want to teach, if you want to remain present, if you want to communicate with your friends, if you want to collaborate with others. So what do I try and do? And yes, my peers have definitely, Benny and all of them have carved a heavy path for themselves in social media. They are beyond active. Okay. But we have discussions about this all the time. I myself want to do it a little bit different, which is I want to let people know what I'm up to. I want to let people know that I'm collaborating with others, and I want to let people know I want to put music out there. When I want to put a clip out, I was talking with a great drummer in Miami, Armando Lopez, about this yesterday. I want to put music on the internet. I do not want to put videos of me having a camera in my face shredding over a tune. I've done a couple of bass solo videos, or like playing along with a backing track. I don't really, call me, controversial, but I don't think that it's really, a part of what I really, really want to do. And I think that Emmett Cohen has done a very good job of marketing his trio and remaining present with his broadcasts. I have to commend him on that. And, whatever this trio is great. Whatever you think of it, it's there. It's real music. There's subtlety. So that's the thing. What are you marketing? Are you going to market a bunch of clips of you shredding? Well, yeah. If you become that guy, and I have friends who do that who are also fantastically deep and subtle musicians, but that's what they broadcast because that sells their product. Well, no shame in the game, man. And that's the thing I'll end with is that at the end of because of the pandemic and everything, whatever you got to do to get by, as long as you're a good person and you do well by others, I don't really care. If you need to do that to sell books, to sell etudes, to pay your rent, who am I to knock your hustle at all? But for me personally, I like educating one-on-one. I like presenting my music. I like to think about where jazz music and Black American music and rock and all this stuff, where it can be pushed to while the listener can enjoy it. And I also like to go back and just play straight ahead jazz, just swing, you know, and market that. But the whole thing of like being an Instagram musician, I'm lucky. I don't have the ability. I just can't play. I can't play that fast. So I'm just in a whole nother, I'm just like, cool. I'll watch you guys to practice playing 16th. And
you could always just press fast forward. Right,
exactly. And I think a lot of musicians my age need to press the slow downer. You know? Go to play a ballad last night, and I'm like, wow, I'm young. I can't get any expression out of this melody because I don't, I haven't practiced playing slow. So that's kind of what I'm working on at the moment, just playing melodies slow,
Yeah. I won't take up too much more of your time, Alex.
No, it's fine. I'm having a coffee. We're hanging.
Good. Well, I'd like to talk about, because you've had the opportunity to play with a lot of different people, and that comes with the collaboration. And it was kind of like when I was speaking to Larry Grenadier, it's like playing with younger people younger than you, contemporaries, people a little bit older than contemporaries, and then there's that other generation, then the older generation. So you've gotten to play with, like Jimmy Cobb and Louis Hayes, Kurt Rosenwinkel, Joey Alexander. So it's kind of like, this big wide spectrum. So I think I know the answer, but do you as a bass player change in these different situations, from playing with Jimmy Cobb to, Joey Alexander, for example?
You think you know the answer? I'm curious to your prediction.
Well, I feel like maybe they're both learning situations. As you're playing, you're probably learning a ton in both directions.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, it's how do I explain this? Well, I find that being a chameleon as a bass player, no pun intended, because it's got a great bass line, I'm trying to make all my friends laugh that watch this, because they know I'm always good for a corny joke. Yeah, you have to be open. You have to be open. You have to be open to it. And sometimes I find that when we study things so rigorously that we can close ourselves off to thinking there's one way of doing things. And the thing that I've learned from being in the studio, from producing records, from playing with a lot of different people is you don't know anything. You know some things that get you there. You know how to put your shoes on to get to the train, to get to the studio. But once you get to the studio, you don't really know anything, and or the stage or whatever that is. So one thing that's helped me is, like, I've heard a lot of studios and audio engineering, when they finish the session, they pack everything up and they turn all the knobs to 0. And that's kind of what I try and do when I'm playing with somebody new who has a very specific thing. Now, there's certain things, like when I was playing with Harold Mayburn, I knew it was probably going to be A through Z repertoire, whatever it is. So I would brush up on that repertoire. I also know all the great bass players that he played with and all the great records he was on. So I would spend the week listening to that. And I would always write out, sometimes they do this, Harold Mayburn, Eric Alexander arrangement with these changes. Let me just jot it down just in case. And then I also know, the gigs, he's one of the great masters of music. So I'm going to show up looking clean. I'm always going to show up looking clean. But, then what else is presented? What else are you learning on the gig? What else are you open to? Well, you show up to Smalls and the bass amp's on the floor. Well, I don't like the way the bass amp sounds on the floor. So I'm going to bring a little book. I'm going to tuck it up, and then I have my DI box, and okay, that sounded pretty good. Next set, I might move it a couple inches over and see. And that all comes from Mr. Carter, straight up. Sir Ron Carter is the absolute greatest scientist of the bass and one of the greatest educators of all time that changed an entire generation of bass players, if not, for the rest of, music. And so I feel the same way about approaching new ensembles. playing with Kurt Rosenwinkel was my dream. That's like a big part of the reason why I moved to New York. And I've learned so much about foundation playing with Kurt Rosenwinkel, like how important roots and fifths can really be and how to use them, you know, in a way that sounds hip, and finding new ways to use them all the time, and how to really be clear playing beneath someone who plays with such great genius and such great exploratory, you know, and just everything. He's a composer, you know, and he's who I really think of when we were talking about previously with different hats and different things. He's a guy who can record and also produces and does records where he sings and does a standards record, and also worked with Toninho Horta and did all this. He's, you know, a chameleon. And a lot of Philadelphia musicians are that way. Joey DeFrancesco, McBride, Orrin Evans. And I like that. That's because we grew up with a whole mess of music.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, just to say that I stay open to all these cats and I learn something. And also accepting that, you know, as a bass player and being a utility instrument, being expected to be able to change and hook up all these different ensembles, it's the best. I love it. It keeps you stimulated. You're learning different music. You're learning how to play with different drummers and different piano players.
Yeah.
This horn player with this drummer in this room and this, it's all these combinations. You know, it's all these combinations, and you never quite get it right. You get it better and better and better.
Yeah.
You never quite get it right. And the bass players that I admire, like, you know, Larry Grenadier and McBride and you know, Peter Washington, speaking about the guys that are around now, obviously Buster and Mr. Carter, their attention to details on such a high level, and they care so much about getting it right, and they are always, you know, I'm trying to look for the word here, they're always, I guess, just adjusting. They're always adjusting to what's going on. So I find myself to be that way. That being said, you develop your own language as a bass player, and you can always expand, you can always learn new things, but you have a vibe. You're a bass player, you have a certain sound, certain thing that you like, at least in periods of your career that can change. And sometimes you're not a hookup with somebody else. You don't hear music the same way as somebody else, you don't, and that's okay too. That's okay to do 2 or 3 gigs with them, and it's not, you know, you just give your best no matter what. It doesn't matter if you're playing in an Irish pub or you're playing the Irish National Concert Hall. You're just gonna give 1,000% all the time. And so that's gonna make those experiences when you work with people that you might not match up with, it's gonna make them, they're gonna be good anyway. Yeah. Because you're working hard to keep your level. So that's what I think about, is just consistency, and I'm always loving to play with new people. I just bumped into Joel Ross the other day. We hadn't played in a long time, a couple of years, and we were like, man, there's people, I get excited about that. Seeing Jason here, my friend from high school, it's always a challenge, and there's always new music and new ways of playing to learn, and I try and stay really open to that. And I feel very fortunate to have that.
Well, and it's cool too, because each of those experiences, you just put them, they're like in a memory bank, a sound bank.
Little bowl there, you know?
Yeah, just put that little piece away. Well, have you ever had the experience of playing with somebody, whether it was a master like Jimmy Cobb or someone like that, where it wasn't hooking up and they either said something or they said it in the music in a certain way?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it was, you know, of course it was me. I was young and something, you know, or at least, who knows, maybe it was the drummer or the piano player, you never know. Or it's the thing about fault is the misconception. I think a lot of the young guys are like, oh man, but the older guys, I'll give you a perfect example. I was in a lesson with Jimmy Cobb when I was studying with him through the New School, and I wanted to play Winds of Chambers. I tell this story a lot, but it's a good one. And I counted it off, and I put it on the wrong side of the beat. And I've been listening to Winds of Chambers since I was a kid. And what I realized was, where the recording starts, where the pickup is, I always thought it was on the other side of the beat. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, that's where it is. Yeah. Right? I thought it was I always thought it was on the other side, which I think is 2 beats the other way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I started playing it, and the only time Jimmy Cobb ever said anything to me, was mortified. He's like, no, that's Paul's tune, but that ain't the way it goes. And I was like, Mr. Cobb, I'm so sorry. He goes, baby, ain't nothing to it but to do it. That's what he said to me, and I tried to carry that through all the situations with the different people that I played with. First time I played with Kurt, with Orrin Evans when I was 19, I was scared shitless, it's like somebody you listened to growing up. And then, that was one of those instances where it was, me like just not, being able to hang. I'm sure it was fine. But I'm sure, there was a bass player in a 50-mile radius that was older than me that maybe could have carried it better. But Orin was giving me the chance, and Kurt was giving me the chance. And then 3 years later, we played 4 years later at the Jazz Standard. I felt really comfortable, and it was a fantastic gig. And you need people like that to give you these chances. So a lot of the older guys, when Mayburn would play a tune, he would every once in a while play these Shaka Khan and Earth, Wind & Fire tunes that had all these parts. I watched a lot of bass players fold on it because it's not like, 2/5 and the bridge. It's a pop tune. Through composed bass and stuff. And he never got upset about that kind of stuff. When George Coleman, when I was on stage with him and he would go into something, I think on that one I actually did pretty well, but there were instances where like multiple keys and all these different things, and they were always patient. Mm-hmm. Always super patient. So I'll put it this way, because I don't want to name names. It's never been with any of the great like older masters that I've ever really had any conflict, and I've had very, very little conflict in my career. I think actually a surprisingly little amount, considering the industry we work in and how much stuff goes on and happens. And I try and be genuine and real with people as much as I can be. But when stuff has not hooked up, it's early on with the peers is where the problem was, because it's this young, machismo, like, you're hormones, you're 18, you think you know better about stuff and you get into it, and that was like not good. And I think everybody that I'm not specifically mentioning, I think we all grew up a lot. It's a lot it's one thing to grow up in the music at 18, but then it's another thing to grow up as a person. So if it wasn't hooking up with the older guys, it was because of me. And even if there were nights where maybe I felt like, maybe it was dragging and I needed to push it. It always felt like it was a team effort with everyone, with all the great heroes I've worked with. It's never been anybody playing against me. And if there's somebody playing against me, I generally try and avoid them, because that means they don't want to be around me.
Yeah. And I'm sure those, the older musicians like George Coleman, they probably didn't have to say anything because they knew the next night or the next time you played, you would have taken care of whatever you might have thought was
on the set break. I would panic, like if I didn't, I'd be like, I don't know, I was so scared to say no. And also, coming from my dad, you didn't say no. You didn't say anything because they didn't ask. They just started playing. Yeah. And if you don't know, down in the depths on the 90th floor into like, Cy Coleman, I've got your number in 3 different keys, then you're toast. But the difference is, one is a private event and, the person having their glass of wine doesn't notice. The other one's on stage. So I was always scared to say no. And I really enjoyed working with Joey Alexander, actually, for that reason, because he was always coming up with like new arrangements all the time on the road, which is really cool. And he didn't always have them written out. Sometimes he had them written out, but sometimes you just learn a whole new way to play a tune and sound check and then do it that night. I'm into that kind of stuff. I like that stuff makes me feel alive. Yeah. That learning curve. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think I just have one more, maybe 2 more questions, but you've put out, how many records have you put out now? Like at least 3?
A bunch, man. Wow. I didn't want to put out a record. I was in school and people were like, you write nice songs, you should put out a record. And I was like, bass player, leader, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then I put out those first 2 Claffy records, and the people that love them, and they have contacted me because I can confidently say that they don't sound like anything else I've ever heard. And I work.
No, it sounds like you too, and I'd like to talk about that because it, especially after talking to you right now, it's got that Philly vibe of, I don't just do this. I'm not one thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And it's hard for us. I was talking with Jason about this last night. It's hard for us to relate to some of these people who just got into jazz. And they were like, they found jazz and that was their into music. So then it's jazz is their whole.
And if you mention one other thing, they freak out.
Yeah. The jazz police are very much alive and very much real. And, I think a lot of people will not talk about that, but it's the truth. It's around and it's bad. It's bad for the music. That being said, we need institutions like Jazz and Lincoln Center and like what Wynton Marsalis is doing. We need that because there's such a deep history of music that needs to be preserved and appreciated, and I'm with it all the way. That's not where the issue is. And I anytime people on social media do that, get on that tip, I'm like, no. The jazz police are actually the people that are around the gigs that only like hard bop from this era or only like piano trios from this era. And they hear somebody coming with a new thing, a new sound. Chick Corea wasn't that way. He heard the electric piano and he was probably like, wow, this is amazing. I'm going to embrace this. And also you don't have to be futuristic and embrace it. Just don't dog it. Just let people do their stuff. And if you don't like it, that's your problem. And that's fine. I don't like olives, but I'm not on Facebook all day. Olives are the, or texting people man, do you see those olives last night at that bar? They were really smelling. It's just a pointless thing. So that's what I'm talking about with Philly. We came up with all these different styles all the time, and we didn't even know it. And then we also came up with a brother and sisterhood of musicians, just a communion of people of all types and races, creeds, and genderless, whatever, everything that was really loving and loved the music and loved the hang and loved the whole thing. So, I'd hear Mike Boone at Chris's play Satellite, kill it, and then go down the street and play electric on Feels Like Making Love, and it's just as heavy. That's kind of what the Claffy records were about. And Ernest Stewart's a great trombone player from Philly, and I worked with him a lot in high school. And I got to have him on one Claffy band gig at Fat Cat, which we used to do Friday nights because it's like a party in there, and we'd blast and we'd have the organ and the piano, and I have electric with the pedals, and Chad had his pedals. And I think this particular one was Benny Benack and Ernest. And Ernest came to me, he's like, man, this is exactly like Philly. Like time. It's jazz, but it's not jazz, but it's R&B. It's like, yeah, man, that's our music. That's our Philadelphia thing. McBride in the set will bust into some James Brown stuff. It's awesome. And so so that's what I was going for, but I wanted to fuse it a little harder. Rather than going genre swing, pocket. I wanted to try and bring the harmony of jazz into, and this is actually before I really even listened to Steely Dan, who really, to me, found that perfect balance and also appealed to the public. But I have to really thank, first and foremost, Michael Perez Cisneros and Ben Yunson for their hard work on those records, because we weren't always sure where we were going, and they always guided me to the right place. Put in a lot of hours. So there's another one I'm working on where I'm playing all the instruments and singing. I'm working on it for a while. I'm not sure when it's going to come out. Could be 10 days, could be 10 years. It's really just depends on the next couple of weeks here. So yeah, that's the vibe. And then I have 2 records out. I'm sorry, I spoke a little too early. I have 1 Standards record out. Standards, What Are You Doing the Rest of Your Life on SMK, Smoke's record label with Kurt and Dave Kokoski. It's a great band. And I have 1 more coming out, and 1 more I just recorded 5 days ago. And they're both with the Cellar Live label, which is out of Canada. And one is the Alex Claffy Trio featuring Michael Stephenson, who's a great vocalist who you're going to be hearing a lot about. And the next one after that is a record with Joe Farnsworth, Nicole Glover, Benny Benack and Julius Rodriguez. We just recorded that a couple days ago, and it's pretty straight down the middle, burning. So I'm excited for people to hear that too.
Nice. So for the nerds out there, I don't know if you're like a gear person.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so can you tell us your gear, your bass setup? You know, for like, I always like to know, like, for live performances, how you like to set up.
Oh, yeah, totally. Well, I've run the gamut. Not gamut bass strings, as we all know, you know, of course. Although I am using a gamut red diamond gut at the moment. But I've tried it all. I started off playing really, really bad plywood bass, and I had a bunch of cheap basses that I would sell and then get another, you know, like I had a nice K. I had I had a sort of a K that was in rough shape, and I sold that when it broke in half at Smalls to Neil Kane. And then I got a nicer K, and then I kept that, and I got a Juzek. It was a blonde Juzek. A lot of people saw me playing. It was like one of the few blonde Juzeks I've ever seen, very thin. And then I sold all my basses, and I got my main now, which is an Emmanuel Wilfer. We weren't sure whether it was a Juzek Master Art or an Emmanuel Wilfer, but my great luthier, Zach Lane, he just let me know the other day that it's definitely a Wilfer. I've had it for 6 years. I bought it after a Joey Alexander tour. I played a Wilfer in Germany, and I tried to buy it from them, and they wouldn't sell to me, so I took pictures, and when I got back to the States, they had one on Craigslist. So I bought it on site, and it's amazing. Full circle pickups always been the way to go. You know, I used to have the Sheps mic, which I know Larry Grenadier loves, and Ben Street, and a lot of those. Rick Rosato also was using it around the same time I was. I don't think that for a lot of the work that I was doing, it was practical with Joey Alexander's trio, especially playing big concert halls and stuff like that. It sounded great. But I think actually really I've learned to embrace the pickup, and I think we as bass players are not doing enough to support the pickup itself, which is I use this incredible DI box, which I hope everybody runs out and gets. It's called the Tone Bone Radial PZ Pre. It's an incredible piece of equipment. It's a DI box because it matches the impedance. What most upright bass players don't realize is the impedance out of your piezo pickup does not match the amplifier, the Aguilar or Ampeg or even Gallion-Kruger, I think, with GK. But most bass amps, it just doesn't match. Fender, all that stuff. So this DI box balances it, and it's got an EQ on it. It's got phase. You know, all bass players should learn about phase and how it affects them when they're playing in a venue, and how flipping phase can help to clear up your sound. And really taking after my heroes like Mr. Carter and Mr. Grenadier in that regard, being very detailed in that. So I just used the full circle with my Wilfer, and I have a red diamond gut. Right now I have two Spiros, D and A, and I have a Labella Mr. Carter signature blonde, the newer one, string. So that's like, I like to think of it as like the lower resonance down low, two steel strings, and then a red diamond that gut on top. You know, I was using velvets, but they wore through, and I just used them on my last record 2 records ago. So that's generally the setup. And then if I'm at a venue, I just request an RE20, or great. If they have a DPA, cool. If they have a Sheps, amazing. If they have Sennheisers, if they have Neumanns, amazing. But, you know, I also keep a RE20 at home in case I have a Universal Audio Apollo, and if somebody needs me to track something remote, RE20 or the condenser I'm using halfway across the room to speak to you, those two together even, it's fine. So yeah, listening is my main arsenal, and these guys are my main, keeping these guys connected to my ears, you know.
Yeah. Oh, good. So the nerdy people will enjoy that. And I know you said that, you know, you got some more records coming out and projects, but the last thing I'll ask you is, what do you feel like is next for you? Do you have some goals that you still haven't attained, or, you know, what do you see happening? What do you want to happen?
Well, I find that if I work on daily goals, I'm getting much further in the long run, really. But I do have some things I want to, musically, it's every day. I want to learn a new song. I want to work on my scales. I want to get more in tune. I want to shed to classical music. I want to get better with the bow. I want to be able to play slower. I want to be able to play faster. I mean, there's a list. I have a list on, in my notebook, things that I want to get better with. And I'm just trying to attack one thing every day. I try to attack one big thing from the music and one big thing for my career every day, because that's the world that we live in. You have to stay active and to be able to make money, to survive, to eat. So, and that allows you free time to practice. So it's a cyclical thing. But mainly musically, yeah, I want to get this record out. I want to begin singing more and playing bass. I've been told by those who know me closest that it would behoove me to do something like that. So that's a major goal. I want to get a dog. That's a major goal. I want to learn to drive because I'm blind in my left eye. So I've never been able to drive, but legally I can. So I want to learn to drive. And so there's a bunch of, I want to get in shape a little bit more. I've been working on that, been working out most days. And that helps with the bass too. So there's a whole bunch of goals. Composition, make more records. And so I just try and focus on 2-week chunks. Like on the way down here, I'm on the road, I made a list of stuff that I want to get done while I'm here, and this was one of them. So it's been very, very nice to be here with you.
Yeah, this has been really great. I mean, I see you running a festival, running a record label. I see super big picture stuff just from talking with you. So I wasn't sure if that was in your...
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would love that. It's great how Christian McBride has done all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think as bass players, too, there's just that innate sense on how to get people together, how to be a music director, how to be a producer, because we're there in this triangle of people, and we're always at the focal point, in the back, listening to everything, seeing everything. So I think it's an easy thing to just start doing without even knowing you're doing it.
Yeah. I think it's an innate thing, and it's also not innate in a lot of bass players. A lot of bass players that I know, they just want to just leave me alone. I just want to do my thing, and I just want to gig, and don't bother me, and I don't want to talk to anybody or whatever. And that's fine too, however you want to play it. But for me personally, yeah, I think I love organizing bass lines and organizing compositions, and I love organizing gigs and festivals or whatever. I've done a lot of that, and I just feel really lucky to be doing anything at all during this pandemic. So it's been a really, really good experience the past couple of weeks, and hopefully that snowballs into more people being healthy and back to work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful, Alex. This was so great for you to take the time. I really appreciate it. It was great to meet you, speak with you, learn a little bit more. And that's it. That's all I got to say.
Next time we'll get you on my podcast.
Oh, that's what I wanted to mention. Yeah, it's called The Village Green, your podcast.
Yeah. I'm not as regular. I need to, it's tricky scheduling the interviews, but there's more coming. There's definitely more coming.
Okay, good. Yeah. And I always put links to everybody's stuff below this. So yeah, everyone will check out The Village Green, check out your music, your website. And I mean, I think there's going to be, we already see a lot of you now, but we're going to see even more of you, I think.
Oh, that's sweet of you. Thank you very much. And you too.